The crystal halls of Veth Prime had stood for over 1,000,000 years. They were built by the first species to discover faster than light travel, and now they served as the meeting place for the Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of alien civilizations gathered here to discuss matters of great importance. Today, the matter was humanity. Elder Corvith floated into the chamber. He was not made of flesh and bone like most beings. He was made of pure light, shifting between colors that had no names in any human language. He was old, so old that he had watched stars being born and dying. He had seen civilizations rise from the mud and fall back into dust. In all his years, he had never seen anything quite like the humans. The chamber fell silent as he took his place at the center of the great hall. Around him, hundreds of alien delegates watched with various eyes, sensors, and organs of perception. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had no physical form at all. But all of them listened when Corvith spoke. "We must discuss the humans," he said. His voice did not come from a mouth. It simply appeared in the minds of everyone present, translated perfectly into their own languages. A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. The Vraxian delegate, a creature that looked like a giant insect with shimmering wings, clicked her mandibles nervously. The Tyrellian ambassador blinked all 6 of his eyes one after another. Nobody wanted to talk about the humans. They discovered faster than light travel only 40 of their years ago, Corvith continued. In that time, they have expanded to 7 star systems. They have built colonies on worlds we declared uninhabitable. They have adapted to environments that should have killed them. Ambassador Zhenkai of the Pale Consortium raised one of his many tentacles to speak. He was a patient creature, known for his calm approach to problems. "Surely we can implement containment protocols. We have done this before with aggressive species." Corvith's light flickered, which was his way of showing frustration. "I cautioned this council 12 cycles ago. I warned you then that humanity was different. You chose to wait and observe. You chose to believe they would slow down." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the chamber. "I tell you now, plainly and clearly, humanity is already too late to stop." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted in languages that sounded like music, like thunder, like breaking glass. Some demanded immediate action. Others called for more study. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Far across the galaxy, on a world that humans had named New Montana, Captain Danny Holt stood on a cliff and watched the sunset. The sky turned orange and purple, colors that reminded him of evenings back on Earth. Beside him, Lieutenant Beth Curry was kneeling on the rocky ground. Running a scanner over some soil samples, Danny was a tall man with gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had spent 20 years in space, first as a pilot, then as an officer, and now as the captain of the exploration vessel Starward. He had seen wonders that most people on Earth could not imagine. But moments like this, watching a sunset on a new world, still took his breath away. 6 months ago, this was a barren rock, he said, looking down at the valley below. Construction drones moved back and forth like busy ants, building homes and roads and power stations. Now we've got 12,000 people calling it home. Beth looked up from her scanner. She was younger than Danny, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had joined his crew 5 years ago as a fresh graduate, and now she was the best science officer he had ever worked with. "The council won't like it," she said. This system was supposed to be off limits for another 100 years. They wanted to study the native microorganisms first. Danny shrugged. "The council can file a complaint. We needed room to grow." He watched as a transport ship descended toward the landing pad in the valley. More colonists. More dreamers looking for a fresh start. Besides, our environmental teams are working with the local ecosystem, not against it. We learned from our mistakes back home. Beth stood up and brushed the dust from her knees. I'm not arguing with you, Captain. I'm just saying we should be prepared for pushback. Let them push, Danny said. We'll push back harder. In the colony below, a woman named Rosa Vega was unpacking boxes in her new home. She had been a teacher on Earth, working in a crowded school in a crowded city. When she heard about the colonization program, she had applied immediately. Now she stood in a small but clean house, looking out a window at an alien landscape, and she felt something she had not felt in years. Hoped out her daughter, Lily, ran in from the other room. She was 8 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's curious eyes. Mom, there are 2 moons. 2 moons? Rosa smiled and knelt down to look out the window with her daughter. Sure enough, 2 pale spheres hung in the darkening sky. You're right, baby. Isn't it beautiful? Can we go outside and look at them? Rosa hesitated for only a moment. On Earth, she would have worried about traffic, about strangers, about 100 different dangers. But here, on this new world, the only danger was the unknown. And Rosa had decided that the unknown was worth the risk. Yes, she said. Let's go look at the moons. They walked outside together, mother and daughter, and stood in the cool evening air. Other families were doing the same thing, coming out of their new homes to look up at the sky. Children pointed and laughed. Adults held hands and whispered to each other. For a moment, they were not colonists or pioneers or statistics in a government report. They were simply people, looking up at the stars, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Back on Veth Prime, Elder Corvith ended his speech with a warning that would echo through the halls of the Council for years to come. You ask me what makes humanity dangerous, he said. It is not their weapons. It is not their technology. It is their refusal to accept limits. When we tell them something is impossible, they do it anyway. When we tell them to stop, they move faster. They are not driven by conquest or greed. They are driven by something far more powerful, the simple belief that tomorrow can be better than today. He looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates, beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. We cannot stop them, he said. The only question now is whether we will stand beside them or be left behind. The Council voted to continue monitoring the situation. They believed there was still time. They were wrong. The Krix Dominion had ruled the Outer Rim for 800 years. They were a warrior species, tall and powerful, with thick scales and forearms that ended in razor-sharp claws. They believed in strength above all else, and they had conquered dozens of worlds to prove their power. When a human mining ship called the Venture accidentally crossed into their territory, the Krix saw an opportunity. Here was a chance to remind the galaxy who controlled this part of space. Here was a chance to show these new humans that they should fear the Dominion. The Venture was a small ship with a crew of 37 people. They were not soldiers. They were miners and engineers, scientists and technicians. Their captain was a man named Frank Delgado, who had spent 30 years in space and was planning to retire after this last mission. The Krix warship appeared without warning. It was massive, 10 times the size of the Venture, bristling with weapons. Captain Delgado tried to explain that they had made a navigation error, that they meant no disrespect, that they would leave immediately. The Krix commander did not care. They boarded the Venture and took the crew prisoner. They brought them to a detention facility on Krix Prime, the homeworld of the Dominion. And then they did something that would prove to be a terrible mistake. They tortured the humans. They broadcast the screams across open communication channels for the entire galaxy to hear. Admiral Grace Sutton was on the bridge of the carrier, Defiance, when the transmission came through. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 40 years, starting as a young pilot and working her way up to the highest ranks. She listened to the screams of her fellow humans for exactly 30 seconds. Then she turned off the transmission and called her senior officers to the briefing room. Commander Pete Logan arrived first. He was her tactical officer, a big man with broad shoulders and a calm voice that never rose above a conversational level, even in the middle of a battle. Lieutenant Commander Annie Park came next, the ship's intelligence officer, carrying a tablet full of data. Then came the others, weapons officers, flight commanders, marine captains. "The Cricks have 37 of our people," Grace said when everyone was assembled. "They are being held at a detention facility on Cricks Prime. Intelligence suggests they are being tortured for information about human military capabilities." She paused to let that sink in. Every face in the room was hard, angry, controlled. "The Galactic Council has advised us to pursue diplomatic channels," she continued. "They believe negotiations could secure the release of our people within 6 to 8 months. Pete Logan spoke quietly. "Our people might not survive 6 to 8 months, Admiral." "No," Grace agreed. "They might not." She pulled up a holographic display of the Crick system. The homeworld was heavily defended, surrounded by orbital stations, patrol ships, and weapons platforms. It would be suicide to attack it directly. "The Council did not ask for our input on this matter," Grace said. "They assumed we would follow their advice. They expected us to be patient and reasonable." She looked around the table at her officers. "They don't understand us yet." Annie Park stepped forward with her tablet. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the Crick's defenses. They're strong, but they have weaknesses. Their patrol patterns are predictable. Their communication networks are centralized. And most importantly, they don't expect an attack. Nobody has ever attacked Cricks Prime before." Grace nodded slowly. "What do you recommend?" "A surgical strike," Annie said, pulling up a detailed battle plan. "We go in fast and hard. Disable their communications first so they can't coordinate. Hit their orbital defenses before they can power up. Drop Marines directly onto the detention facility. Extract our people and leave before they know what happened. Casualties?" Grace asked. Annie hesitated. "Unknown, Admiral. It depends on how quickly they respond." Grace stood in silence for a long moment, looking at the holographic display. She thought about the 37 people being tortured on that distant world. She thought about their families back on Earth, waiting and hoping. She thought about the message it would send to the galaxy if humanity did nothing. "We go," she said, "tonight." The Battle of Cricks Prime began 6 hours later. The Defiance and her support ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel right on top of the Cricks communication array. Before the enemy could react, human fighters swarmed the array and destroyed it in a storm of missiles and laser fire. The Cricks fleet was suddenly deaf and blind. Unable to coordinate their response, Grace watched the battle from her command chair, issuing orders in a calm, steady voice. "Squadron 2, hit the orbital platforms. Squadron 3, clear a path to the surface. Marines, prepare for drop." The Cricks fought back hard. They were warriors, after all, and they did not surrender easily. Their ships rushed to defend the homeworld, firing everything they had. Human ships took damage. Some were destroyed, but the humans did not stop. Corporal Maria Santos was in the first wave of Marines to hit the ground. She was 23 years old, small and quick, and she had never been in real combat before. As her drop pod slammed into the courtyard of the detention facility, she felt fear like she had never known. Then she heard screaming from inside the building. Humans screaming. The fear disappeared. Something else took its place. Something cold and hard and absolutely determined. She kicked open the pod door and led her squad into the facility. They moved fast, room by room, taking down Cricks guards with precise shots. The enemy was larger and stronger, but the humans were faster and they were angry. Maria found Captain Frank Delgado in a cell on the lowest level. He was badly hurt, barely conscious. She knelt beside him and took his hand. "We came for you," she said. "We came to bring you home." Frank opened his eyes and looked at her. Despite everything he had been through, he smiled. "I knew you would," he whispered. "I told them you would come. They didn't believe me." The extraction took less than 2 hours. All 37 prisoners were recovered alive. Many were injured, some critically, but none were left behind. As the Defiance jumped back into faster-than-light travel, Grace Sutton looked at the damage reports. She had lost 4 ships and 82 good people. The Cricks had lost their entire orbital defense network and their reputation as unconquerable warriors. She hoped it was worth it. In his hospital bed on the Defiance, Frank Delgado was surrounded by friends and fellow survivors. A young medic named Jenny Harper was treating his wounds, working with gentle hands and a soft voice. "The Cricks told us no one would come," Frank said to anyone who would listen. "They said humanity was weak. They said the galaxy would let us die." He looked around at the Marines who had rescued him, at the medics who were healing him, at the officers who had risked everything to bring him home. "They were wrong," he said. "They were so wrong." Observer Mithran had served the Galactic Council for 300 years. He had visited thousands of worlds and studied hundreds of species. He had seen civilizations at their best and at their worst. He thought he understood how young species behaved when they first reached the stars. They were usually cautious, uncertain, and eager to please their elders. Humans, he was about to learn, were none of these things. His ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Montana system. Immediately, his sensors detected things that surprised him. There were orbital stations around 2 of the planets, mining operations in the asteroid belt, communication satellites spreading signals across the entire system. All of this had been built in less than 5 years. "Impossible," he muttered to himself, checking his readings twice. The reports must be wrong. But the reports were not wrong. As his ship approached New Montana itself, he saw even more evidence of human activity. The planet had been classified as barely habitable, with thin air and extreme temperatures. The Council had predicted it would take at least a century before any species could build a permanent settlement there. The humans had done it in 18 months. Commander Lisa Dunn was waiting for him when his ship landed at the main spaceport. She was a woman of medium height, with red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and a face that seemed to always be smiling. She wore a simple gray uniform with no medals or decorations, though Mithran later learned she had earned many. "Welcome to New Montana, Observer," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I hope your journey was comfortable." Mithran did not have hands in the traditional sense. He was a Kalori, a species that resembled tall, thin trees with smooth bark-like skin and branches that served as limbs. He approximated the handshake as best he could, wrapping one of his smaller branches around her fingers. "The journey was adequate," he said through his translator device. "I am here to evaluate your settlement's impact on this world's native ecosystem." "Of course," Lisa said, her smile never wavering. "Let me show you around. But first, can I get you something? Water? Nutrients? We've got a brewery running now. First beer produced outside the Sol system. The colonists are very proud of it." Mithran's translator struggled with the concept of beer, but he understood it was some kind of social drink. "I will decline for now. I prefer to begin my inspection immediately." Lisa nodded and led him toward a waiting vehicle. It was a simple ground transport, clean and efficient. As they drove through the colony, Mithran looked out the windows and tried to process what he was seeing. The streets were full of people. Not just workers, but families. Children ran and played in open spaces while their parents watched from nearby benches. Shops and restaurants lined the main roads, selling goods and food that had been grown or made right here on New Montana. There was noise and movement and life everywhere. "How many people live here now?" Mithrin asked. "About 20,000, Lisa replied. "We're expecting another 5,000 next month." 20,000 people on a world that was supposed to be uninhabitable. Mithrin made a note in his report. They arrived at a large building on the edge of the settlement. A sign above the door read Environmental Integration Center. Inside, they found Dr. Carl Webb, the head of the department. Carl was a heavy man with a round face and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He wore a white coat covered in dirt stains, and his hands were rough from years of working in soil. He shook Mithrin's branch hand enthusiastically. "Observer, welcome. I've been looking forward to this visit. Please, let me show you what we're doing here." He led them through the building, explaining each department as they passed. There were rooms full of plants, some native to New Montana and some brought from Earth. Scientists studied them side by side, learning how they could grow together. "The native plants here are tough," Carl explained. "They evolved to survive harsh conditions. But they don't produce much oxygen. So we're working on hybrid species that combine the best of both worlds. Native toughness with Earth productivity." Mithrin examined the plants carefully. "This is genetic modification?" "In a sense," Carl said. "But we're not forcing anything. We're encouraging natural processes, just faster. Think of it as helping nature along." They moved to another section where massive machines hummed and whirred. "Atmospheric processors," Carl said proudly. "They take the thin air and make it thicker, more breathable. We've already increased the oxygen level in this region by 8%. This will take centuries to affect the whole planet," Mithrin observed. "About 400 years by our calculations," Carl agreed. "But that's okay. We're patient. And in the meantime, our dome cities let people live comfortably." Mithrin was confused. 400 years is patient. Carl laughed. I know. By galactic standards, we're still babies. But we've learned that some things are worth waiting for. We made mistakes on Earth, observer. We rushed things. We took shortcuts. We damaged our own world because we wanted quick results. His smile faded slightly. "We're trying to do better now." They walked outside to a hillside that had recently been planted with trees. Tiny green sprouts pushed up through the rocky soil, reaching for the sun. Carl knelt down and touched one of them gently. "These will be forests someday," he said. "Real forests with birds and insects and animals. Our grandchildren might not see it. Their grandchildren might not see it. But someone will. And that's enough." Mithrin stood on the hillside and looked out at the colony below. He saw homes and schools and hospitals. He saw people working together, building something that would last long after they were gone. He had visited hundreds of worlds, but he had never seen anything quite like this. That evening, he returned to his ship and wrote his report. He described everything he had seen: the rapid expansion, the environmental programs, the happy families, the patient planning. And at the end, he added a single recommendation. "The humans are not a threat," he wrote. "They are an opportunity. The Council should accelerate diplomatic engagement immediately. If we do not work with them, we will be left behind." He sent the report through official channels and waited for a response. The Council received his report. They discussed it briefly. They decided that one observer's opinion was not enough to change their policies. They voted to continue monitoring the situation from a distance. Mithrin requested permission to stay on New Montana as a permanent liaison. His request was denied. 2 months later, Lisa Dunn sent him a package through the diplomatic mail. Inside was a bottle of New Montana's first beer and a handwritten note that said, "Come back anytime. There's always room for friends here." Mithrin kept the bottle on his shelf for many years. He never drank it, but every time he looked at it, he remembered the little colony on the impossible world, and he wondered what the humans were building now. The news of the Battle of Crix Prime spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species with access to communication networks knew what had happened. The Crix, who had been feared for 800 years, had been humiliated by a species that had only discovered faster than light travel 4 decades ago. Elder Corvith demanded an emergency session of the Galactic Council. For the first time in centuries, every seat in the crystal halls was filled. No one wanted to miss this discussion. Ambassador Zhenkai of the Pale Consortium spoke first, his many tentacles waving with agitation. The humans have committed an act of war against a sovereign nation. They have destroyed military infrastructure. They have killed hundreds of Crix warriors. They must face consequences. The Crix delegate, a scarred warrior named Vornuk, remained silent. His people had been defeated, and in Crix culture, the defeated had no right to speak. What consequences would you propose? Corvith asked calmly. His light flickered with colors that suggested deep thought. Economic sanctions? The humans are already building trade networks that do not rely on council systems. Military intervention? You saw what they did to the Crix. Do you truly wish to test them in battle? The chamber fell silent. No one had an answer. A delegate from the Morian Collective, a species of small, furry beings known for their wisdom, raised a paw to speak. Perhaps we are approaching this incorrectly. The humans did not attack without reason. They went to rescue their own people. In their position, would any of us have done differently? The council offered diplomatic solutions, Zhenkai protested. Diplomatic solutions that would have taken months, the Morian replied. Months during which their people were being tortured. Would you have waited patiently while your own citizens screamed in pain? More silence. The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and unanswered. Corvith rose to his full height, his light expanding to fill the center of the chamber. I warned this council 12 cycles ago. I told you that humanity was different. You dismissed my concerns. You spoke of manageable growth and integration protocols. Meanwhile, humanity did what humanity always does. He projected a holographic display showing human expansion over the past 40 years. Colony after colony, spreading outward from Earth in all directions. Trade routes connecting human worlds to alien markets. Research stations pushing the boundaries of known science. Hospitals offering human medicine to species that had never known such care. They do not ask permission, Corvith continued. They do not wait for approval. They see a problem and they solve it. They see an opportunity and they take it. When their people were captured, they did not debate or negotiate or wait for us to save them. They acted. He let the display fade away. We cannot control them. The only question now is how we will work with them. On Earth, President Maria Santos stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The chamber was packed with representatives from every nation, all waiting to hear her address the galactic situation. Maria was a tall woman with silver hair and a face that showed every year of her 60-year life. She had been a soldier once, a diplomat, then a politician. She had seen humanity at its worst and at its best. Today, she spoke for all of them. We did not seek conflict with the Crix Dominion, she began, her voice steady and clear. When our mining ship crossed into their territory by mistake, we were prepared to apologize and withdraw. We meant no offense. She paused, and her expression hardened. But the Crix chose to take our people. They chose to torture them. They chose to broadcast their suffering as a warning to others. They believed that humanity would accept this. They believed we would abandon our own citizens to save ourselves trouble. Her voice rose slightly, not with anger, but with absolute certainty. They were wrong. The galaxy must understand. Humanity protects its own, always, without exception. We do not leave our people behind. We do not trade their lives for political convenience. Every human being, from the richest president to the poorest worker, has value, and we will fight for every single one of them. The chamber erupted in applause. Not polite applause, but the deep, thunderous applause of people who believed what they were hearing. We do not wish to be enemies of the galaxy, Maria continued when the noise faded. We have much to offer. Our medicine, our technology, our ideas. We want to share these things. We want to learn from other species, just as they can learn from us. But we will not be bullied. We will not be threatened. And we will never, ever abandon our own. The speech was broadcast on every human channel and transmitted across the galaxy. Within a week, enlistment in the Earth Defense Force had increased by 40%. On dozens of colony worlds, people gathered in public squares to watch the president's words replayed on giant screens. Something had changed. For 40 years, humanity had been focused on survival and expansion. Now they were beginning to understand their place in a larger community. They were not just settlers anymore. They were members of a galactic civilization, whether the Council accepted them or not. On New Montana, Captain Danny Holt watched the speech with his crew aboard the Starboard. Beth Curry sat beside him, her hand resting on his. "What do you think happens now?" she asked. Danny shook his head. "I don't know. But I think the Council is going to have to make a choice. They can work with us, or they can get out of our way. And if they choose to fight?" Danny looked at her with sad eyes. He had never wanted war. He had joined the exploration service to discover new worlds, not to conquer them. "Then we fight," he said quietly. "We don't want to. We'd rather be friends. But we're not going to apologize for being who we are." In the crystal halls of Veth Prime, Elder Corvith watched recordings of human celebrations. He saw families hugging each other. He saw children waving flags. He saw old soldiers standing at attention while the president spoke. And he saw something that surprised him. He saw hope. These humans were not celebrating violence. They were celebrating survival. They were celebrating the fact that 37 of their people had been saved from a terrible fate. They were celebrating the simple truth that no one had been left behind, for the first time in many centuries. Corvith felt something like admiration for a younger species. "You were right to warn us," said a voice behind him. He turned to find the Morian delegate standing in the doorway, her small furry face looking up at him with wide eyes. "The Council did not listen," Corvith replied. "Perhaps they will listen now." The Morian moved to stand beside him, watching the human celebrations together. "They are remarkable, these humans. So young, so fragile, and yet so determined." "Yes," Corvith agreed. "And that is precisely what makes them dangerous. Not their weapons or their ships, but their determination. They simply refuse to give up." The Morian nodded slowly. "Is that such a bad thing?" Corvith considered the question for a long time before answering. "No," he said finally. "Perhaps it is exactly what the galaxy needs." 5 years had passed since the Battle of Crix Prime, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Human colonies now numbered in the hundreds. They spread across dozens of star systems, each one a small piece of Earth planted in alien soil. But more importantly, humanity had stopped thinking of themselves as outsiders. They had become part of the galactic community, whether the old powers liked it or not. Admiral Danny Holt stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, humanity's first major installation in Council space. Through the massive windows, he could see ships from 100 different species docking and departing. Vraxian traders unloaded exotic goods. Kellery scientists exchanged research with human colleagues. Even a few Crix vessels moved through the traffic, Their proud warriors humbled, but not broken. Beth Curry stood beside him, her hair now streaked with gray, a gold ring shining on her finger. She had been his wife for 3 years now, and she still served as his chief science officer, though their ship had grown from a single exploration vessel to an entire fleet. "The elders are calling for a vote," she said, reading from her tablet. "They want to officially integrate humanity into the council structure. Full membership, full voting rights." Danny laughed, a warm sound that came from deep in his chest. "Integrate us? We're already running half their relief programs. Our medicine has saved more lives in the past 5 years than the council's health initiatives managed in the past century. They need to feel like they're in control," Beth said with a knowing smile. "Let them have their vote. It doesn't change what's already happening." What was already happening was nothing short of a revolution. Human technology had spread to dozens of species who had been denied advancement by council regulations. The old powers had kept certain technologies restricted, claiming that younger species were not ready for them. Humanity had ignored these restrictions and shared freely. Faster-than-light communication systems that once cost more than a planet's entire economy were now available to anyone who wanted them. Medical treatments that had been hoarded by wealthy species were being distributed at cost. Human diplomats had brokered peace between civilizations that had warred for centuries. They had a unique approach to negotiation. They listened first, spoke second, and always looked for solutions that benefited everyone. It was not that they were more clever than other species. They were simply more willing to see enemies as potential friends, and everywhere humanity went, they brought the same message: you are not alone. On the planet Vrax, a young female named Kithra was attending the first day of a new school. This school was different from any that had existed on her world before. It taught not just Vraxian knowledge, but human science, Kalori philosophy, Morian art. Students from a dozen different species sat together, learning from each other. Kithra was nervous. She had never spoken to a human before. But when she entered the classroom, a human boy about her age smiled at her and pointed to an empty seat beside him. "Hi," he said. "I'm Tom. What's your name?" "Kithra," she replied, her mandibles clicking uncertainly. "Cool name. Do you like astronomy?" "I love astronomy. There's supposed to be a meteor shower tonight that we can see from the roof." Kithra did not know what to say. On Vrax, children did not talk to strangers so easily. But there was something about this human boy that made her feel welcome. "I would like to see that," she said. Tom's smile grew even wider. "Great. I'll save you a spot." In the medical center of Unity Station, Dr. Carl Webb was training a group of alien doctors in human surgical techniques. He was older now, his hair completely white, but his hands were still steady and his eyes were still kind. "The key," he explained, guiding a Kalori doctor through a delicate procedure, "is to respect the body you're working with. Every species is different. What works for humans might not work for you. But the principles are the same. Do no harm, learn constantly, and never give up on a patient." The Kalori doctor nodded, his branch-like fingers moving carefully. "You humans are very patient teachers." Carl smiled. "We've had a lot of practice making mistakes. Now we try to help others avoid the same ones." In the crystal halls of Veth Prime, Elder Corvith cast his vote in favor of human integration. The decision was not difficult for him. He had watched humanity grow from a small, curious species into something remarkable. He had seen them make mistakes and learn from them. He had seen them show mercy to enemies and kindness to strangers. When the vote was announced, a young council aide asked him why he had supported the humans so strongly. Corvith's light flickered with amusement. "Because they were never going to stop," he said. "From the moment they looked up at the stars, they were going to keep reaching until they touched them. No warning could have changed that. No barrier could have held them back. He paused, remembering the first reports he had read about humanity, back when they were just another species learning to fly. And perhaps, he added, that is exactly what the galaxy needed. A species that refuses to accept limits. A species that believes tomorrow can be better than today. We old ones had become comfortable. We had stopped dreaming. The humans reminded us what it means to hope. On Earth, in a small house in a quiet town, Rosa Vega sat on her porch and watched the sunset. She was 63 years old now, her dark hair turned silver, her hands worn from years of teaching. Her daughter Lily was grown, married, living on a colony world 3 star systems away. She had 3 children of her own, Rosa's grandchildren, whom Rosa had held in her arms just last month during a visit. Rosa thought about the night she had first arrived on New Montana all those years ago. She remembered standing outside with Lily, looking up at the 2 moons, wondering what the future would hold. The future, it turned out, held more than she could have ever imagined. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see her neighbor, an elderly Vraxian named Kithra, who had retired to Earth after a long career as a diplomat. Kithra had been one of the first alien exchange students decades ago, and she had fallen in love with humanity's strange, beautiful world. "Beautiful evening," Kithra said, settling into a chair beside Rosa. "It is," Rosa agreed. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and purple and finally dark. Stars appeared, one by one, each one a sun around which planets orbited, each planet home to countless beings living their own lives. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Kithra asked. Rosa nodded slowly. "All the time. When I was young, we didn't even know there were other species out there. Now my grandchildren play with Vraxian and Kelari children like it's the most normal thing in the world." "Because it is," Kithra said. "It is the most normal thing in the world now. Thanks to you." Rosa laughed softly. "Not thanks to me. Thanks to all of us. Every human who reached for the stars. Every alien who reached back. We built this together." They watched the stars in silence for a long time. Finally, Kithra spoke again. "The elders used to say that humanity was dangerous, that you could not be stopped." Rosa smiled. "They were right." "Yes," Kithra agreed. "They were right. But they were also wrong. You are not dangerous because you cannot be stopped. You are beautiful because you cannot be stopped. Because no matter what happens, no matter how hard things get, you keep reaching for something better." Rosa reached over and took her friend's claw-like hand in her own. "That's all any of us can do," she said. "Keep reaching, keep hoping, keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today." Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy transformed. A galaxy where humans and aliens worked side by side. A galaxy where old enemies had become new friends. A galaxy that was still growing, still changing, still reaching for something greater. Thought the elders had cautioned, counseled that humanity was already too late to stop. They had been right, and the galaxy was better for it.